Warriors.
The story of the Warriors and the journey back to Coney Island is a certified cult classic. It's a movie that left quite an impression, having the video game of the same name fill in the blanks we didn't know we wanted. In this video of Rando Snaps, we're going to dive into the Warriors movie and game. Like, comment, subscribe, and you know I appreciate you for it.
Can you dig it?
The Warriors was a movie from 1978, directed by Walter Hill and based on a book by Sol Yurick. Showing the story of a huge meeting among all the gangs of New York City, it was set up by Cyrus, the leader of the biggest gang in NYC, the Gramercy Riffs.
Yeah!
At the grand meeting, two evils converge on them. The cops, with a surprise raid at the meeting, and Luther, the leader of the rogues, who shoots Cyrus and blames the Warriors.
The Warrior! He shot Cyrus! Yeah, that's him.
This puts a TOS, terminate on sight, on the oblivious Warriors, whom are set to make the journey back to the south end of Brooklyn from the north end of the Bronx. Roughly a 20-mile journey, give or take, which is a lot when the train and your 2 feet are the only options of travel. They start the journey with 9 and end with 6. Oh, and Mercy.
Mercy, stop looking for trouble now.
After an insane night, they make it back to Coney and face off with the rogues, ready to go in. Luther reveals that he had no intention besides causing chaos.
I just like doing things like that.
He lets off a shot that somehow doesn't hit anyone. I'm guessing I'm supposed to believe he shot too high up after getting a switchblade in his arm. I'll leave it. The Riffs come through after figuring out it was the rogues and not the Warriors behind Cyrus getting shot.
You Warriors are good. Real good. The best.
Giving safe passage and respect to the Warriors, whom walk off into the sunset and roll credits, the end. The movie was awesome. The movie didn't have any stars, but you recognize James Reamer, who played Ajax in a couple of places, like Brian's handler in Too Fast, Too Furious, or as Harry Morgan, Dexter's dad, in Dexter, to name a few. Also, David Patrick Kelly, who played Luther, was in Crooklyn, The Crow, John Wick series, and way more. As for the book, I'm not going to go too far into it, but I'm going to break it down a bit. It's drastically different from the movie. It is a much more gritty, and it's borderline depressing if I'm being honest. That was kind of the point though, as Sol Yurick was an NYC welfare worker that wanted to paint a raw picture about the gang life. A lot of movies and media were glamorizing and even glorifying gang life. Sol Yurick didn't like that. So he wrote the book to give an honest look and breakdown of gang life. The book is drastically different from tone to characters. There wasn't even a gang named the Warriors. The Warriors were, in fact, all the gangs of the night. They weren't anti-heroes here. They were just straight up hooligans. I'm just gonna be honest. The book ends with the grim look at the home life of one of the gang members, with him walking in and hearing his mother audibly being smashed by her boyfriend while her baby sister is crying hysterically. In fact, it ends with him sucking his thumb, laying down, falling asleep in the fire escape. He just wanted to get away from the insanity of his home after all the insanity he was dealing with outside. Kind of sad. The book definitely serves to display the grim reality of not only gang activity, but the environment that would lead to a disillusioned youth to follow this kind of path. If you can't tell, Sol Yurick was not a fan of the movie, as he felt it did the opposite of what he intended with his book.
Violence by street gangs has inspired a new movie, and the movie called The Warriors may be inspiring even more violence.
So this movie had a shorter run than planned in theaters. It got pulled from theaters as it was blamed for groups of young men rioting and acting out in and near the movie house. This movie wasn't critically held in high regard, but just for that alone. Roger Ebert called it a ballet of stylized male violence. I'm not gonna lie, that's actually pretty accurate. I do think this was more reflective of the time because the 70s was very different and looked at media very differently. Standards were held very differently at the time. So I think that was really what worked against it. This movie wasn't meant to be taken seriously, which is kind of easy since the movie doesn't take itself too seriously. It was retrospectively given its critical praise, kind of like Scarface. Watch my Scarface video. The home video release is what made this movie gain its notoriety and cult following. It's fair to say it was more appreciated once the real life element of gangs had changed. This wasn't exactly a spot-on representation of how gangs moved in NYC and much of the US, but it was pretty close and drew a lot of inspiration from real gangs of the 70s. In 2005, Rockstar released the video game. This game was amazing, and it made everyone a fan. I even talked about it in my reboot video. You remember that one, right? The game starts 3 months before the movie with Rembrandt's initiation. The real charm of the game was that it fleshed out the characters in a way that the movie just didn't. With just the main story alone, you keep switching between characters and getting more acquainted with the gang by the time you get to the actual meeting. While the game does make changes to the story from the movie, it follows the story beat for beat. As you complete the main story, you unlock access to flashback levels. These levels show you how the Warriors were formed and how different characters joined. The charm of these levels is how well it explores each character involved. By the time you're about to start the missions that are lined up with the movie, you're so well acquainted with all of them, you probably already figured out who your favorite character is by then. It allowed you to explore the environment of the movie as well. And while it had its flaws with things typical of Rockstar at the time with bad cameras and clunky controls, it was an amazing experience nonetheless. And like every couple years I actually play this game. It was just such a different feel from games out at the time and ever since. It's hard to argue against it. It completely stands on its own feet. You do not have to watch the movie to enjoy this game, but it will make you appreciate the movie if you enjoy the game. Some random facts: the story is actually inspired by an ancient Greek story where an army of 10,000 had to make it from enemy territory all the way to get home without their leader. In fact, the fact that the Warriors' home base was Coney, which is where the ocean is, was drawn directly from the story, because the army knew once they saw the ocean, they knew that they had made it home. While obviously this is a fictional look at gang culture at the time, the look was actually very close to what gangs looked like in the 70s, with much of the wardrobe actually pissing off gangs from the time. Very random fact about the game: when you're streaming this game on Twitch or YouTube, it's very tricky because all the original music and movie plays throughout the gameplay, making much of the game audio unusable during any playback. In the director's cut from 2005, Walter Hill added comic book transitions. He wanted to use this for the original cut, but was over budget at the time. Also, believe it or not, that simple effect was actually very expensive back then. The goal of it was to emphasize the comic book nature of the movie and story. The fire that had stopped the first train that they were on actually came from a suggestion by the MTA. They asked them what would cause a train to just stop in its tracks, and fire on the track was one of the answers. The infamous come out and play scene was actually improvised by David Patrick Kelly. David Patrick Kelly actually explained that the idea from the come out and play actually came from his neighbor who used to mess with him at the time. Apparently, he said the neighbor would scream, "David, come out and play," and that's what he decided to run with. The entire movie was filmed on location with the exception of the bathroom fight scene, as the actual bathrooms in the MTA are actually about 1/4 of the size shown. The scene with the Turnbull ACs chasing them with the bus is set in the Bronx, but the station shown is actually Broadway Junction in Brooklyn. If you look, you can see the train that they say is theirs is a J train, which is a train that runs from Queens, Brooklyn, and Manhattan. It doesn't even touch the Bronx. What's called 96th Street Station is actually 72nd Street Station. I never really was able to find out why they changed that. When there's filming involving train tracks, there's a dead track at the Hoyt and Schermerhorn station in Brooklyn. If you have a good eye, you can actually catch cuts of the station tag switching from 96th Street to Hoyt and back being shown. I love this movie, in case you can't tell. The comic book feel, the mystique of how things are displayed. It's goofy and campy, but I can take it as seriously enough and still enjoy it, you know what I mean? I really like a lot of different elements of the movie and characters. The game made me appreciate the characters and story tenfold. It's a twisted version of NYC that feels very lived in, and the game allows you to deep dive into it. I think a remake is long overdue for this game. Different aspects of the story, game, and movie that I would like in no particular order.
You see what you get, Warriors? You see what you get when you mess with the orphan?
I found the orphans to be hilarious. They're interesting but weak. The Lizzies, the girl gang that used seduction to lure the guys into a trap, they a problem. And they're on some gangster shit, let's be honest. Think about it like this. How many dudes you think met their end because they didn't have a Rembrandt to point out and peep that it was a trap? I just like the Lizzies was an element that was very well added, and it was kind of cool. It was a nice touch considering that young dudes playing macho. It was kind of cool to see that there were chicks out there that will gladly take dudes down a peg. Ajax, I liked him a lot. I hated how his character went out, but he had that coming to him. Like, it was honestly disappointing that getting home wasn't a priority for him. But I did think that the lesson presented was a great way to end his chapter. As someone who has elders that grew up around this time, it was very unnerving to think that there were really people like that just didn't see an issue with what they were doing. The Baseball Furies were the coolest and most horrifying gang in the movie and game. Their appearance and silence made them menacing. Alright, I'm going to wrap it up here because I know there's a lot that I'm overlooking, but there was also a lot of stuff I could not verify as factual. I didn't want to name anything here and not have anything to verify with it. Either way, I highly recommend this. I will look for another good excuse to revisit this subject, as I love the game and I love the movie. There was a lot of talk about them like doing a remake. They were talking about this since like 2005, back when the game first came out, and nothing. I never heard anything more about it. I'm not gonna lie, it does seem like one of those stories though that it's fine where it is, but I'm not gonna get mad if, like, I'm gonna go see it if like they do a remake of it, because I'm all over this. But yeah, that's a wrap for now. Like, comment, subscribe. Y'all got any suggestions for me to dig into? Drop it in the comments so I could take a look. And yeah, till next time, later. Rando Snaps.
Can you dig it?